I'm here today with Dan Kieran, who is co-founder of Unbound, the award-winning publishing platform that he led as CEO for over 11 years, taking the business from an idea on a piece of paper to a profitable global company. Having stepped down in March 2022, he remains on the board as a non-executive director, and he now teaches on the publishing MA at UCL. He's the author and editor of 14 books, including the best-selling Crap Towns, The Idle Traveller and The Surfboard. And his latest is Do Start, which won the Startup Scale-Up Book of the Year at the Business Awards 2024. So first of all, welcome, Dan.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. And secondly, congratulations. Have you stopped grinning yet?
No, well, thank you so much. Yeah, I was completely thrilled and unexpected. I didn't imagine I would win. So no, I felt very special that night. It was brilliant.
It was a good night, wasn't it? Just talk us through your reaction when they called your name.
Well, it was brilliant because, I mean, without sounding conceited, Unbound has won quite a lot of awards, and I never went to get any of them. It was as a sort of leadership principle. I always got the people that actually did the work to go and get awards when we won them. So I never actually picked one up. So yeah, I had that lovely moment of looking shocked with my wife, and then getting up and walking to the stage. No, it was. Hey, I'm unabashedly a fan of it. It was wonderful. Yeah, we had a great, and it was a brilliant night. I met brilliant authors, and I love so much that it is open to all authors. I think that's such a powerful thing to be doing, because especially in the world of entrepreneurship, it's all about having done it.
Yeah.
And I think that the quality is so high. I mean, I read the other books in my category, and these are serious people who've done serious things. So that made it even more pleasing to come out on top when the quality was so high.
Yeah, it is. It's a terrific setup, really, isn't it? And just that sort of sense that these are books that are really useful for business leaders, which is the real emphasis of the awards. You're unlike most of the authors who will have won, as you just alluded to. You've seen a lot of books through, haven't you? Was it oddly, you're sort of, I don't know, poacher turned gamekeeper, or the other way around? I don't know. What's it like on the other side?
It's a strange thing. Yeah, completely, not deliberately, but no, you're quite right. I mean, I've done all kinds of books, been published by most of the big publishers. And of course, running Unbound was a real adventure. I mean, I think being an author running a publishing company was really interesting because the challenges of the industry are such that looking at it through an author's lens gave you a huge amount of insight, but also horror because it's so hard. And once you're looking at it from every angle, it becomes very difficult to deliver for everybody involved. I mean, I left because too many people said to me, "Oh, we've just got one of your books," and they didn't mean one of my books. They meant one of Unbound's books. And after 12 years, they got too frustrating, and I wanted to go back to writing my own. But obviously, I'm hugely proud of Unbound and what it's achieved, and what it is continuing to achieve since I've gone.
And I'm a huge fan of anything that disrupts the business models of publishing, because traditional publishing is a very problematic business proposition, isn't it? So it's really exciting that and that sense that the author is a much more active participant in the process. I guess, do you know what? For people who have going, what the hell are you talking about? Can you just give us the quick sort of 30-second introduction to Unbound?
Yeah, no, of course. It's a great idea. So yeah, essentially we started it like 12, 13 years ago, maybe 14 years ago now. But Twitter had just started, so authors were just beginning to capture their own audiences through social media. And publishers, as you have said, they're like famous for they change just enough to ensure they don't have to change at all. And so they hadn't really taken the opportunities of the internet. And I felt quite critical of that because it felt to me like they had basically given Amazon their audience. And I felt like, as custodians of an industry, it was their role to safeguard that connection with the readers themselves. And obviously, they do it through bookshops, who do brilliant things to progress authors' careers and to support publishers. But it just felt like they dropped the ball. So Kickstarter was also a year old, and we just had this idea that if we could crowdfund really interesting ideas, then we would also be harnessing the power of readers, because for publishers are obviously brilliant and talented in different ways, but they don't sell books to readers. They sell them to shops.
To booksellers, yeah.
we wanted to do was, well, we could use this new thing called the internet to bring authors and readers together, and then readers could decide what they wanted to read. And we curated, and still do very heavily, what goes on the site. It's absolutely not open. But it was just about saying, let's ask the audiences now what they want, because, as you all know, publishers use historic sales data to choose what books they're going to publish in the future. So they're basically driving by looking in the rearview mirror. And the beauty of crowdfunding is that if there's something exciting now, you can harness the interest now, you can monetize it now, and then you can publish the book subsequently.
Yeah,
so
that was de-risking the project, and it unleashes a lot of creativity in the authors. I remember listening to, I used to lecture up at Oxford Brookes with Scott Pack, who told me some great stories about some of the things that authors would do as their rewards, because you can get a copy of the book, but it doesn't need to stop there. I think my favourite was the sweary poet who would come on a train journey with you with a pack of lager and sort of do a train journey and sort of just blether to you. It wasn't Brian Bilston, was it? Who was it?
It could have been. Well, that was a real insight that we discovered, which was that people, publishing is fascinating. They spend this money on this intellectual property, and then they sell it in the cheapest possible price point. So what we found very quickly with Unbound is that some readers wanted to spend £1,000 with an author, with their favourite author. And the existing publishing business model turned that £1,000 into $7.99, because the only thing they were selling them was a discounted paperback, or $9.99 now, because the price has gone up. And that just felt like an insane waste, especially at a time when authors' earnings were collapsing. So we felt like if we can monetize the whole range of price points, and be a bit more creative, and crowdfunding only works if the creative person in charge of the project is completely committed to it.
Yes.
So exactly
it's not an easy option, is it?
Yeah, authors would come up with rewards that were completely unique. But also incredible. Like, I remember for the Alan Garner book we did, he gave guided tours of some of the places that his books were set in Alderley Edge. And we actually had emails from people saying, that is literally the best thing that's ever happened to me in my life, spending the day with my favourite author going to some of these places. So we and everybody knows publishing and books have that impact on readers. But there was just no way of, not monetizing it specifically, but there was just no way of feeding that interest and that fascination. And obviously you see it in literary festivals. But publishing just felt a bit like it should be trying harder. And you talk to agents and they're tearing their hair out. They're desperate to find new ways of helping their authors make more money, but also to just sort of slightly go beyond the book, I think.
Yes.
So we didn't fix publishing by any means, but the other thing we found was that if you were an author that didn't see yourself reflected in the culture around you, either because of ethnicity or sexual orientation, or because you were into video games or into a subculture that wasn't reflected, you felt fairly in the world around you. We just had masses of success with those kind of projects because we were attracting authors who didn't see themselves in the traditional publishing model. And, I like to think we've had an impact in publishing as a result of that, because lots of authors used us to prove there was interest in their particular perspective or experience, and have then gone on to have traditional publishing careers. Yeah. So, I feel like we did good things. But difficult to do.
Yeah, it absolutely is. It's a very difficult industry, and it's a very low margin industry. I think that's part of the problem, is that publishers don't feel that they've got the kind of resources to experiment, which is a different kind of conversation. And actually, I could talk to you about publishing all day. Genuinely, I know to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to ask about your book. But it's a really obvious segue, isn't it? Because everything you learned there, everything about spotting the opportunities and connecting people and disrupting the industry, all of that feeds straight into Do Start. But I want to know about the genesis of the book. Where did that come from? Who sort of said, I know.
I left Unbound to write books. And my first thing was, I better bloody write some books. And I've been writing a novel for 7 years, which I'm very, very nearly close to finishing, which is actually why I left, which I'm very excited about. But I won't talk about that today. But basically, I left in April. And I knew Miranda, who runs the Do Book Company, because she actually started at a similar time as Unbound. And obviously I went to the Do Lectures, and it was a completely transformatory experience for me. And I'm a huge fan of David and Claire Hyatt, who run that. And loads of other brilliant things that they do.
We have had
And I've
Miranda on this
always
podcast, by the way, if anybody wants to know more about that. Yep, she's told us all about that. So it was such a brilliant. I wish I'd had the thought to phone them up and say, hey, how about doing a series of books around these?
Yeah, well, that's just Miranda all over.
Genius.
She's so smart and forward thinking, and she's a brilliant publisher. Like, it's so hard to do what she's done. Like, we should totally acknowledge that. I mean, it's incredibly difficult. So yeah, essentially, I did a do lecture, and I saw her there, and we hadn't seen each other for a couple of years. And she sort of said to me in passing, "Oh, once you've done a do lecture, you're allowed to do a do book if you can come up with an idea that I'm interested in, type of thing." Because she's not a pushover.
She's not a pushover by any means.
No one who's done a do lecture should think they automatically get books. It does not work like that. But when I finished, I had this massive desire to record how I was feeling in that moment, because I was still close enough to it for it to feel current. But I also was getting the beginnings of a perspective and seeing it, like looking back on it. And I just sort of messaged her one day and I said, "Look, what do you think?" And she messaged me straight back and said, "Well, there are loads of titles I haven't done that I want to do. And one of them is called Do Start. Why don't you write about starting a business?" And it was amazing because the brief is incredible. You get a framework, which is like, it has to be this kind of length. You have to write it for one person. You've got to imagine you're talking to one person, which is why they're so approachable and I think and accessible. And, she was just like, make it cover everything you wish you'd known. And the real bonus of it was in the conversations I had with her, as I said, I don't want to write a practical book that's specifically practical. Because there are loads of books about spreadsheets and how to do
how to register your business and
there's all that kind of stuff, which are great. But I'd never read a business book that talked about how it felt. And because I'm a writer who became an entrepreneur, I obviously come to entrepreneurship with this kind of way of trying to articulate an experience. So it was almost like gonzo journalism, like I'd spent 12 years doing this thing, and I'd really lived it to the extraordinary extent. And then I got to write about it, which was also like incredibly thrilling, because that's the thing that really gets me fired up. So I wrote it quite quickly in about 3 months. And I just wanted to make it incredibly useful. And I wanted an entrepreneur to read it and feel like I knew how they felt.
Oh, I felt seen reading it. It's really interesting.
Right, I hear that so much. And it is literally because I'm saying I was terrified a lot of the time. This is how I cope with my fear, or I felt really exposed in these situations. Because the problem with business books generally is that they're all people trying to tell you how great they were. Like, generally, they're just showing off because they're seeing a bit insecure and they want you to think they're brilliant. And to some extent, mine is like that too, right? Because I think that's a kind of aspect of the genre.
Well, we want to read about winners, don't we? Yeah, we want to read your lessons, but we want you to have come out on top, because otherwise, what have you got to teach us? Yeah,
exactly. If you haven't had some kind of success, then what can you share? So there is a bit of that in my book, but it was mainly about, okay, I'm going to hold your hand and be with you as you go through all these different stages. And so that was the intent. And so when I finished it and Miranda read it, she gave me some excellent feedback, and we fiddled around it with it a little bit. But yeah, that was my goal, really, to have a guide alongside you that's saying, you feel terrible today because this has happened and it's really doing your head in, but this is why you shouldn't panic, and these are some things you can do. And that was really my journey of the business, really. It was how to handle the pressure of what was happening, because so much of it was out of your control.
And I mean, you say it's not practical, but your tip about running as a sort of business strategy, I am here for that.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, I mean, there was that side of it. It was like, how do you become resilient, which is the number one attribute you need to have as an entrepreneur. And so it took me a long time to figure out what to do to build that resilience. And yes, giving up booze, running, doing tons of therapy, all this kind of stuff, I had not looked at through the lens of my career before. I'd sort of seen them as, it would be nice to be able to do that.
Yeah, but I haven't got time because I'm working.
Yeah, well, the more I worked on myself, the more I delivered for work, and the happier I felt in my own skin. So I started to see my work as the kind of stage upon which I was evolving as an individual. And that is what makes you a great leader, because your staff see you evolving yourself. So, and it also means that if everything goes wrong and it's a disaster, you still have an exit because you have evolved and become a different person. and stronger and more resilient as a result of the experience. And that's what my book is trying to help you figure out, that that's the path you need to be taking while you're running your business, because you'll be way more likely to succeed.
And you'll be a lot happier and alive when you come out of it. Yeah, no, it's a really empowering message. You are a writer, as you say, and most writers of business books aren't. That's not their kind of primary profession. But you've written an awful lot of different types of things. Obviously, your novel, but you've got this, and you've done other sort of edited collections and so on. What role, I guess, does writing play in your life? I mean, I know it's your sort of primary occupation, but what does it look like, and how do you? Why is it so important to you?
Oh my God, I've dreamed of being asked this question. I love it.
You're welcome.
It's just a way of being, I think. I'm obsessed with this at the moment, that meaning is relational. It's not in a goal. It's in the distance between one thing and another. And like the novel I've been writing for so long, the reason it's amazing is not because of the novel. I mean, obviously, I hope it'll be successful, but it's completely changed my life the 9 years I've been doing it, because I've had this creative project that my mind is always going back to. So the analogy I always use is, when you're driving a car, if you let go of the steering wheel, it will naturally straighten, right? It will just naturally go in a straight line. And if I have no other demands on my brain, and I have time, which is not very often at the moment with loads of young children, but if I can let go of the steering wheel of my brain, it just naturally gravitates towards the thing I'm writing. And it's that attempt to articulate the thing which, we're all trying to make sense of, which is being human. And I read amazing stuff about neuroscience, where the part of your brain that makes decisions has no capacity for language. So you're always trying to retrospectively explain the instinctive decisions you make. So writing is really about it's same as talking, any form of communication. It's really about understanding yourself. So becoming a writer and writing a business book, for example, you should see it as a way of trying to explain to yourself what you did and what you're doing, because you don't know until you go through the process of trying to verbalize it. And then you start to realize that it's that process that's enriching and nourishing and makes you feel amazing. And yes, you'll get an end product, but it will really change your life while you're doing it. And that's why I love writing, and it's just like a life gift, I think, to have it. And it's why I'm so terrified of AI today, because it sort of suggests you don't need to go through that beautiful, alchemical, wonderful process to make sense of yourself. You can just cheat by getting ChatGPT to do it for you, which I know it has appropriate applications, and I'm not saying it's terrible, entirely. But it takes away that search to mean what you say and phrase what you mean and feel. And it's that process that is what makes writing so powerful.
I'm sort of nodding so vigorously, I'm actually hurting my neck a little bit, because I think that it's so true that a lot of people see writing as a thing that you deliver at the end of the day. This is my bit of writing, and here it is, and it's got a function, and particularly in business. But writing it's an active verb. It's a thing that you do. It's a process that you go through. And if you just delegate that to every time I go on LinkedIn, it says, "Would you like AI to write a personal?" No, I absolutely would not, because the process of writing is what I'm after here.
Why would anyone want to read something that you couldn't be bothered to write?
Right. Yeah, it's a great way of phrasing it. Yeah. I think we've got books written by AI, praised by AI, some reviewed by AI. I mean, just what is the actual point? Yeah, we're delegating the wrong things, aren't we?
Yeah, I just think it's like if you take a helicopter to the top of a mountain, you still get the view, but you don't. If you climb it or walk it, you're living, right? And it changes what you see when you get to the top, because of the perspective and the struggle that makes it look different.
That's so true. And your emotional connection to it is going to be completely different.
And that's telling you about yourself. That's your journey of figuring out, why we're all here. And so I know I have some clients who are deaf, for whom ChatGPT frees them from the tyranny of written language. So it can be amazingly positive. But I just think we're in that time now where we just need to make sure we're applying these things appropriately, and then we're not losing our sense of who we are in the process of using it. But no, so I mean, everyone should write. It's about the way it makes you feel, the goosebumps you feel. It's about that experience of really engaging with yourself. Like, it's so therapeutic, it's so enlivening. And I think if you get a book at the end of it, amazing. And there are loads of great things you can think about for actually writing a business book. But that should be where it comes from. It should be from you being curious about what you do and what you did and how you can share that with someone in a way that's going to resonate.
Because once you've articulated it to yourself, you can share it with other people. Now, I always say that it's such a powerful self-development and professional development project as a business person. I think most people who are in business and who want a book see the value of an actual physical book in the business, but what they don't always recognize is just how valuable the writing of that book is going to be in
Totally. It's like anything that's goal driven. They think the goal is to have the book, but no, the goal is to become the person it takes to write your book.
That's a great way of phrasing it.
That's why you're doing it. And yes, you can have a nice thing at the end of it. Hooray. But
there it is, look.
you can't if you can't live it, then it will be empty when you get there. And I think it's all about meaning. You've just got to figure out what you mean and what you want to convey. And that should be hard. It should be a struggle. It should take a lot out of you. And these are all good things and will make it better. Yeah. It's a brilliant thing to attempt.
I'm going to force you to pull all that together into your single best bit of advice for somebody who's just setting off on this journey, specifically around business books, because there's all different kinds of writing, as we've established.
Yeah, well, the best advice is find your voice. And I think that's really hard because you have to find the way of being yourself on the page. And that's really difficult if you haven't written before, because you will think you should be like this, or it should sound like this. Or you might, sort of overindulge yourself and sound insincere. So that is the trick. How do you find your voice? Well, I think you have to be comfortable in your own skin, whether you're writing or not writing. My rule of thumb, Gandhi had this great quote where happiness is when what you think, do, and say are the same thing. And I sort of use that as the handrail. I always try and make sure that I mean it, like I really mean what I'm trying to say, and that I'm not trying to be clever or cute. I'm just going to be myself on the page.
Yeah. Or what you think people expect to read. I think that's often a common one, isn't it?
Yeah, and writing does have this air about it that it's kind of unattainable and difficult.
Yeah, and you have to do it from behind a lecture podium.
Yeah, exactly. But I think what's interesting about business books is people want your real life stories. Yeah. One really specific bit of advice which I've followed is to have 3 narratives. So like a narrative of what happened, a narrative of how your industry changed or as a result of what you were doing, and then your own journey. And a friend told me that years ago, like 20 years ago, and it's really helps because it means you're telling 3 different stories, and if you can weave them together, it becomes like a rope, and it just makes everything stronger.
Yeah.
And if you have too much of one, it loses its balance. So stuff like that's quite helpful. Just say, if I'm telling 3 stories, what are those 3 stories?
Yeah. And where do they intersect? Yeah.
Where do they intersect?
Yeah, because often people say, I want to write a memoir, I've got this really fascinating story. I'm like, well, unless you're famous, actually, I hate to tell you this, but nobody cares about your story, only insofar as it illustrates the bigger story. So that's a really good way of thinking about it. Yeah, and Miranda's advice about writing for one person, directly to one person, I think is
that was really helpful. Yeah, because in fact, that really helps you find your voice, because you know how you talk to one person, right? So, and the other one is diary forms. If you're not used to writing something in the form of a diary just feels like you're not writing a book, you're writing a diary entry, a series of them. And that can just be a way, it might not be the end product, but it just gets you writing, and you start to get stuff on the page. And once you've got something, even if you don't think it's very good, you can work with it, and then you're off.
Yeah, it's the tyranny of the blank page, isn't it? Don't start by writing the sentence that you think is going to actually start the whole book. Don't do that. It's too much pressure.
Yes, exactly that. You've just got to get moving.
Fantastic advice. And I'm going to ask you as well for a recommendation. You're not allowed to recommend Do Start, sorry, but is there a book that you have read, I was going to say recent, doesn't have to be recently, that you'd like to recommend us?
There was one I read called Legacy, about the guy that managed the All Blacks years and years and years ago. And I really, really enjoyed that. But can I have 2?
Go on.
The other one was The other one was a book called Turn This Ship Around, and it's
Oh yeah,
about a guy
and David Marquette.
who,
Yeah,
and he was given the worst performing submarine in the US Navy, and he took it out on operations, and he tore up the rule book, and he did it his own way, and then he got back, and they assessed it, and he now had the best performing ship in the US Navy. And rather than fire him, they asked him to write them a new rule book. And there's just so much about his story that makes you see what it takes and what you have to find in yourself.
yeah, it's such a great book. I love that. I don't know Legacy, so I'm going to seek that out.
Yeah, I can't remember the guy who wrote it, but that was amazing for humility. That was all about, like being a leader doesn't mean everyone has to listen to you. Being a leader means being the one that will catch everything that everybody misses. It's an act of humility, not status. And his book on the All Blacks, like the highest performing players in that team, Richie McGraw, what were they doing an hour after the game? They were cleaning the changing rooms, right? That's leadership, man. It's doing the shittest job, not the best one. Sorry, I shouldn't swear. But those two books.
There's the iTunes clean rating gone. Thank you. Amazing. And Dan, if people want to find out more about you, more about the 14 books, but particularly do start, where should they go?
Just my website, dankieran.com, or lots of people message me on LinkedIn. Yeah, I do all kinds of work with people nowadays, helping entrepreneurs and helping writers. So yeah, if you're curious, get in touch.
Fantastic. Everybody listening to this is curious. That's a great word. Wonderful. It's just been brilliant talking to you, and we've ranged across some of the topics that are closest to my heart, books and writing and publishing and all that kind of good stuff. So thank you very much. I've enjoyed every minute.
It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for having me on.